Hi, everybody. I hope you can all hear me okay. My name's Austin. I've been in Tara for around, following the teachings of Tara for around almost 20 years now. And I've been teaching yoga and tantra for around 13 years. The subject tonight is on synchronicity. This is a subject which has fascinated me for many years, continues to fascinate me, because I feel that it represents a very deep mystery of life. And when you have these experiences of synchronicity, they can sometimes awaken this state of amazement and this state of wonder. So I hope everyone can hear me fine now. I'm going to get going with the presentation. So synchronicity can be described as meaningful coincidences. They are a mysterious synchronizing of seemingly unrelated events. Events which don't seem causally connected. Literally, synchronicity means falling together in time. Everybody experiences moments of synchronicity in their life. I'm sure most of you here, everyone has experienced some synchronicity. Common examples might be when you just happen to receive a message from someone you've been thinking about. Or maybe you walk past some strangers and you get a message. You just overhear them speaking and they give you the answer to a question that you've had. It might be that you meet exactly the right person at exactly the right time. It might be that you go into a bookstore and a book falls out of the shelf. It might also be that you notice strange alignments of numbers and birth dates, for instance, between friends or family members or partners. And here we can mention that numbers are the archetypes of order, and they are major participants in this creation of synchronicity. So these types of events are very widespread. They are reported by people from all different cultures, all different belief systems, across the ages of time. Synchronicity is a universal phenomenon, and yet it has received very little attention of scientific inquiry in modern times. This is despite the efforts of Carl Jung, for instance, who in the earlier 20th century made quite big efforts to bring synchronicity into the mainstream scientific arena. Sometimes synchronicities are very subtle. Sometimes they are astonishing, and they can literally steer the direction of our lives. They often awaken in us this certainty, this intuitive certainty that we are in the right place at the right time. And they can often awaken in us this state of wonder that a greater cosmic harmony seems to exist beyond the limits of our perception and is guiding us in our life. So are synchronicities merely just intriguing chance events occurring amidst a world of chaos, disorder, randomness? Or are synchronicities an effect of the connectivity of the universe, whereby everything is a part of a unified, connective whole? How do synchronicities work? can we trigger them to happen more in our lives? These are some of the questions that we want to explore tonight as we take a glimpse into this mysterious world of synchronicity. I'm going to start by recounting my first notable memory of synchronicity that happened in my own life. It's the first time it happened that I remember was around 7 years old. I went to America with my family. We were on holiday. We went to this kind of water park which had dolphins there, and these very big screens, massive screens, which was showing close-ups of the dolphins, but then also zooming in on members of the crowd. And I was watching one of these screens, and all of a sudden, I see one of my classmates, a young girl, her face on the screen there. I didn't know she was coming to America exactly the same time as me. But so I was quite shocked when I saw her. I was amazed. And afterwards, my parents met her parents, and we went our own ways. But at the time, I was very young, and I thought, that's quite bizarre. A more profound event happened later on in my life, which really woke me up to the wonder of synchronicity and pay closer attention to them and how they were manifesting in life, in my own life, in the lives of others, and what kind of messages they have. So on this occurrence, I was 18 years old, and I was in my first year of university. I'd moved away from home for the first time. And it was like a new beginning. It was a new phase of life. So it was very exciting. Everything felt fresh, felt new. And on this particular occasion, I was visiting a friend at another university with a group of friends. And we were coming back from this guy's house, and I was, sorry, 1 second. We were traveling back on the bus, and I was reading a book called Jonathan Livingston Seagull. I don't know if I'm sure some of you have read this book or heard about this book. It's a very beautiful little book. I would say it's one of my favorite books, perhaps because of what happened also. But it's a very simple book which can be read easily by a child as well as by an adult. And it's the story of a seagull called Jonathan Livingston who refuses to live life focusing just on survival, the needs of survival. He refuses to live life just as one of the flock. He wants to live life for the thrill, the excitement of learning, of evolving, of excelling in flight, because this is what he loved to do. And as I was reading this book, I felt that the message of this book, which ultimately is about conscious evolution and about engaging on a spiritual path, in a sense, of just continuously evolving and aspiring towards perfection. This message somehow was like mirroring in my heart, like awakening in me, very like a recollection of deeper truths. It was the first time that I read in a book something which I really felt inside mirrored. And it was so exhilarating. I was entering into such a state of inspiration, and that I would have to look up from the book and just take a few moments to catch my breath. And as I did so, I looked over to the other aisle of the bus, and there was this woman sat slightly in front of me on the opposite side. And she was looking back at me, just smiling with this big smile of kindness and compassion. And I smiled back. I continued reading the book. And then again, after a few moments, I would be like, feel very inspired. And like, it was touching my soul. And I felt this exhilaration. And then again, I noticed her looking at me. And this time it struck me as a bit more peculiar because her neighbor, which was a more elderly woman, was chatting away to her, like in full flow. But this woman just was looking at me directly. It was almost like she was ignoring this elderly woman as though she didn't exist. And she was just looking at me, smiling this same smile. And at this moment, I did feel that that's a little bit peculiar, but I continued reading the book. And when we got off at the bus, when we got to the final destination, I got off the bus and this woman came up to me and she said, "I saw the book that you were reading. I thought you might like this." And she gave me a photograph of a seagull in flight. And this was quite amazing to me and took me aback a little. And then this woman disappeared in the crowd. I never saw her again. And it wasn't until like 2 or 3 days later that I actually turned the photo over and read what was on the back of it. And it said there, "The seagull's alive in all of us. Hope you enjoyed the book. With love and light, JLS." So this incident, it was very significant for me. And I couldn't accept it was just pure chance that this happened. And the message that I got from this was to always remember this inner state that this Jonathan Livingston Seagull book had awakened in me, and to always remember the message of that book itself. A few years later on, I also read a book called The Celestine Prophecy, about 3 or 4 years later, and that helped me to open up more to this phenomena of synchronicity and start to observe it more. And it gave me more of a framework, a spiritual framework to kind of understand what was happening. So this I described earlier. Synchronicity can be described as a mysterious synchronizing of seemingly unrelated events which don't appear to be causally connected. Now, the term synchronicity was coined by the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung in the 1920s. Jung was a favorite student of the father of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud, but they broke away from each other due to various differences in perspective, one of which was the fact that Freud didn't accept Jung's belief in the collective unconscious. This idea was that there exists a fundamental connectedness that we all share at the level of consciousness. Incidentally, Jung's own ideas into this subject of the collective unconscious were further expanded upon after he had his near-death experience, which was due to a heart attack in 1944. In that near-death experience, Jung found himself in the presence of a beautiful light, and he had some insights into the nature of synchronicity archetypes and the collective unconscious. Jung was observing and discussing the concepts of synchronicity since the late 1920s. And he even discussed this phenomena with Nobel laureate physicist Wolfgang Pauli and other leading thinkers such as Einstein. Yet he didn't formulate his thoughts about synchronicity into a lecture until 1951, which was nearing the end of his life. Jung's most classic example, personal example of synchronicity, can be found in the epic work on the subject from 1952. So I'm going to read here what he wrote. So he described, in a psychotherapy session, a young woman I was treating had, at a critical moment, a dream in which she was given a golden scarab. This is an Egyptian type of beetle, golden in colour. While she was telling me this dream, I sat with my back to the closed window. Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me, like a gentle tapping. I turned around and I saw a flying insect knocking against the window pane from the outside. I opened the window and caught the creature in the air as it flew in. It was the nearest analogy to a golden scarab that one finds in our latitudes, a scarabide beetle, the common rosechafer, which, contrary to its usual habits, had evidently felt the urge to get into a dark room at this particular moment. I must admit that nothing like it ever happened to me before or since. So this incident was very profound for Jung. And Jung actually described synchronicity, or made the following statement, that it reveals a meaningful connection between the subjective and the objective world. This particular example was a very fine example illustrating just this. Whereas Einstein had found that time and space were very relative to each other, Jung saw in synchronicity the relativity of matter and the psyche or the mind. Frontier sciences such as quantum physics have demonstrated such mysterious effects of the relation of the inner state of the observer, for instance, on outer matter. For example, how the consciousness of the observer affects how particles behave when they are observed. Thus, synchronicity connects the material world to the psychic world through symbols that are not always understood and which often appear from the collective subconscious. In a sense, synchronistic events are like a mirroring of what's happening in our consciousness. Jung also stated that synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see. And we can ask ourselves, how many of us have our eyes and hearts open to pay attention to the synchronicities of our own life and recognize the value that they have for us? In modern society, we are conditioned to dismiss synchronicities as mere coincidences, mundane chance events which lack meaning. This conditioning has been influenced by the mainstream scientific worldview, which, as the brilliant scientist Dr. Rupert Sheldrake has commented upon, this mainstream scientific worldview has become more like a belief system as opposed to an ongoing inquiry into truth. It's as if science already understands the nature of reality. Its assumptions have hardened into dogmas. The fundamental questions of reality seem to be answered, leaving only the details to be filled in. So this mainstream scientific worldview has some fundamental or underlying basic assumptions, such as all reality is material, it's physical. And this world is made up of dead matter. And the world is like a machine. Nature is purposeless. Consciousness is nothing other than the physical activity of the brain. And the idea or the concept of a collective consciousness or even a unified consciousness or God is simply an idea imprisoned in a human skull, in the mind. So because of this worldview, it influences how we interpret things in our lives, and we often dismiss synchronicities. Mainstream mathematics argues that in large enough populations, any strange event is arbitrarily likely to happen by mere chance. Statistics and probability theory, for example, the law of truly large numbers, are suffice enough to explain synchronicity. Yet Jung wrote, "I found where coincidences which were connected so meaningfully that the concurrence would represent a degree of improbability that would have to be expressed by an astronomical figure." So many of these statistics or these chance events, it's hard to believe that they can happen just by chance and be explained statistically. In any case, it's even questionable whether we can evaluate synchronicities just based on statistics, how likely it might happen, because you strip away from that experience what is unique about that individual case and the inherent meaning that it has. Also, in mainstream psychology, in cognitive science, for instance, synchronicity is explained as confirmation bias. So this is the tendency to search for and interpret information depending or in a way that confirms our own preconceptions, our own preconceived ideas. And according to this confirmation bias, we would also avoid information or interpretations that contradict those prior beliefs. Skeptics call synchronicity apophenia, or the tendency of seeing connections and patterns in random, meaningless data simply to confirm our preconceptions. Now, as an example, they point to the idea that if you're told to look for yellow cars, all of a sudden, you'll start seeing many, many more yellow cars appearing to you in life, much more than you initially thought existed. Now, this is a fact to a certain extent, and I'm sure many of you have noticed this, that when you do start to pay attention to something, or something is of interest to you, all of a sudden you notice it being around everywhere. And this often happens because we are receiving so much information through our senses constantly that we filter so much of it out. And we filter out a lot of information which isn't of interest to us and which also doesn't confirm or according to our preconceived ideas. We do this every day, but it's not simply related to how we interpret coincidences. Synchronicities often happen out of the blue when we're not looking for them in advance. There appears to be much evidence of such perfectly choreographed events to occur that they can't happen simply randomly. And especially when improbable synchronistic events occur so frequently that they reflect a pattern. This points to an intelligent design. Max Planck was a Nobel Prize winning quantum physicist in the early 20th century. And he had this to say: all matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force, which brings the particle of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. The spiritual traditions of our planet assert there exists a force or a cosmic harmony that manifests both in the microcosm of our being as well as in the macrocosm of the universe. As above, so below. Synchronistic events represent a mysterious language of God. God is not distant from his creation. He is speaking with us every day in many ways according to our capabilities to hear him. But we've forgotten how to listen and how to pay attention. Synchronicities are always seeking first to awaken us to the fact that there is another side of life that we have yet to discover. Something much more vast operating behind the scenes, a divine consciousness at play in our lives guiding us. The law of synchronicity is sometimes known as the law of miracles. It's complementary to the law of karma, or cause and effect. Synchronicity is this law of miracle where causation is not apparent, and it is much more subtle. And I want to share with you now also another story from my own life, in which I witnessed a miracle, and along with about 300 other men. It was back in 2010, and I'm a part of a group for men, a spiritual group for men, which many people here in Tara are part of, but also across our sister schools in the Atman Federation. And in 2010, this group, known as the Mahavira Ananda Group, organized a spiritual camp, like a one-week retreat. And there was going to be given this initiation into a mantra that facilitates communion with this divine being known as Mahavira or Skanda Kartikeya. There was 300 men at this camp, and on one evening we were all listening to a conference which was 4 hours, a 4-hour conference which was describing Mahavira or Skanda Kartikeya. And at a certain point, we came to this part of the conference where the symbolism of the spear was being described. And this lasted for about 2 minutes, this part of the conference. Now, in that very instant, as soon as was being described the significance of the spear, a ray of light shone through these closed curtains, and it shone through a small gap in the curtains, directly superimposing perfectly on the picture, which you see here on this screen. It was superimposed so perfectly that there was even a gap in the ray of light, exactly where on the poster was the hand of Mahavira. So this was an absolutely amazing phenomena to witness. To be there with 300 men listening to this conference about, and at that specific moment, just this ray of light shining, illuminating the spear, it was absolutely amazing. And it was one of those moments that really made the hairs on your head stand on end. The kind of mathematical probability of this miracle being a plain optical phenomena is something equivalent to flipping a coin and it landing on the same side 60 consecutive times. It said that if the poster had just been 10 centimeters smaller, then this ray of light would have gone far beyond the margins. So, for many of us there present, this represented a miracle. It represented a very profound synchronicity, and actually, we were all aspiring to amplify in us this resonance, this state of communion with Mahavira. But not only did he manifest his presence there, this divine being manifest his presence in our souls, but gave us a very clear sign that he was there in the room, practically. So such miracles are above the laws of nature. They are a manifestation of the godly omnipotence. And I would say that only a divine consciousness can coordinate such a manifestation. Now, Jung believed that synchronicity was a key element of spiritual awakening. It, generally speaking, shifts us out of a more egocentric way of thinking to a viewpoint where we start to accept or embrace ourselves as being part of something much vaster, and that we are interconnected with one another. Synchronicity induces a sense of mystery, a state of wonder and amazement, a feeling of excitement, an increased feeling of aliveness. It often seems to give us this state that we are being guided, and that there is a cosmic harmony which is guiding us in our destiny. We get this sense that our purpose, our sense of purpose, is unfolding before our eyes. This guidance of synchronicity, it is very easy to see in retrospect. It's more difficult to see at the time, but sometimes these examples of synchronicity are so astonishing that they just are a wake-up call, and we can't deny them. Sometimes we might wish that they're not happening because they're like a wake-up call in giving us a sign not to continue in a planned direction. And if that's something that we were particularly wanting, then we might look at that synchronicity as something bad, or even try to deny it. But it is a sign there. In moments of synchronicity, everything becomes very fluid. People, gestures, objects appear exactly at the right time and place. This harmony that seems to come from beyond may appear as a miracle, even in the smallest things. But actually, it's only our ego that stops us from being in a state of synchronicity all of the time. So, a question which might arise for many of us is, how can we open towards the guidance of synchronistic events in our life and even trigger them to occur? So, On this slide here that you hopefully can see, I've listed a few ways of opening up towards this mysterious field of synchronicity. One way is the art of blessing. This is an initiation giving here at Tara, but also in the schools of Atman Federation. It's a very simple technique, very profound, by which we open up towards the manifestation of divine grace. And we ask the divine to manifest that grace in and through us for another person or another being, another event, whatever it is. But we are opening ourselves to the energies of divine grace, which are having a very high frequency of vibration. We could say that they are the supreme energies of life. So that the more that you practice this art of blessing, you are actually raising your own vibrational field, purifying your being, and activating these invisible subtle forces that connects us to this synchronicity field. Another way is practicing karma yoga, which is one of the fundamental paths of yoga, which has the same goal as any other path to achieve the state of yoga or union, the expansion of the consciousness to this state of union with the divine, but through action. And this means that we can integrate all of our actions in daily life in a spiritual way. And there are two main aspects of this. One is that we will practice the art of consecration. So before we do an action, we will aim to offer all of the fruits of our actions, the karma, to God, to the divine, aiming to get our limited egoistic will out of the way so that the divine can manifest in and through us. And the more that we do these actions, having consecrated them with a state of detachment, then we are opening up to this flow of the divine to manifest through us. And in this way, the ego goes out, yoga comes in. And when our actions are then guided by God, we are much more open to this synchronicities occurring in our life. Another aspect is the present moment focus, or present moment awareness. We should remember that there is only ever one moment, and that is now. When we forget about that single moment, the now, putting our attention on something outside of now, we are forfeiting the immense and singular joy of accepting and being present with what is. In fact, the only way not to be in the right place at the right time is actually to think that we're not in the right place at the right time. That we need something different in order to be happy. When we fully enter the present moment and accept it as it is now, we immediately realize that in actuality, we are in the perfect place at the perfect time, doing the perfect thing. Everything that is unfolding in that moment is as it meant to be, no matter what appearance this moment may or may not take. I can also mention here that when we enter truly the present moment awareness, we are transcending the lower level of the mind, accessing a higher level of the mind, which in Sanskrit is called Vijnanamaya Kosha, or the intellect, or buddhi. So in that level of consciousness, you are having a much higher perception of reality. And you can start to interpret synchronicities and perceive them much more clearly. And you're interpreting them not just from the lower levels of the mind, which is using logic and reason but you are having a more intuitive, direct understanding, which is immediate. Now, when we are confronted with things, particularly that are not going the way we want them to, then we might experience an inner attitude of resistance. But if we start to say yes to life, we are starting to accept and embrace the present moment as it is. When we say yes, we step out of the universe's way and allow the divine orchestration to flow through us, guide our actions and the situation, and align everything in such a way that it all just seems to work out, or at least so that we can accept, roll with it, and find the blessings contained within whatever may unfold. So we have two choices. We can either resist or embrace. We can either say no, or we can say yes to life. The more we open in this state of acceptance and embracing the present moment, the more we can start to appreciate and recognize synchronicities unfolding in our life. Another aspect here, another way of opening towards synchronicities, is to clarify our intentions and to ask for help. And when we're asking for help, this is actually from the seen and the unseen realms of existence, of reality. Sometimes it might seem that we are just by ourselves, like against the world. But nothing is further from the truth. We are all one with each other and one with the divine. And the more that we remember this, the happier we will be. Being reluctant to ask for help actually perpetuates the illusion of separation and the feeling that we're just one little me. Asking for help reminds us that we are part of everything, and it opens the door towards positive change in our lives. When we allow help in other forms, in all forms, by continuously releasing the ego's grip on things and by saying an inner yes to what is, everything begins to work better. So opportunities start to flow more, abundance starts to flow more. And we realize that there are many blessings showering down on us. One thing to mention here is that it is good to ask for help, but doesn't mean that we need to ask for help with everything. We might feel that we need to do some things by ourselves. And also we might need to be aware of just accepting free favors, and sometimes how that can be it can have some risks to it karmically. But it is very good to be open towards receiving help and not just be very tight there and contracted and feeling like you have to do everything by yourself, because then you're giving a message to the universe that you don't need help. So if we ask for help, we also need to be open to receive it. It should be the easiest thing in the world, asking for help, but it's often one of the most difficult things because of this ego-generated illusion that there is something, a problem or something wrong in asking for help, and that instead we should just go it alone. If we have that kind of attitude, it is sending like an energetic message to the universe. I've got this covered. So you're not going to receive so much help, or not be open to it anyway. Another aspect is that just like we just like we have this rhythm of inhalation and exhalation, there is always, in this rhythm, we want to start practicing the occult law of offering and starting to really aim, aspire to offer help ourselves to other people, to other beings, whatever is needed. And this can be in many forms. It could be even offering a smile. It can last forever for some people. It might just take a moment, but the memory of it can last forever. Some simple gestures of kindness. Finding ways to help people. When you do that and you're starting to offer, actually, you become more like a channel for that energy of the divine to manifest through you. So in giving, we also receive, and we open ourselves like to this circuit of being open and giving. Another thing is affirmations. So a few affirmations might be, these are like positive self-suggestions, and of course these false ideas, these affirmations, are triggering processes of occult resonance. They put us into contact with beneficial energies from the macrocosm. So the thoughts that we think due to resonance will have effects. So if we have kind of, if we start to speak more kind of positive affirmations and flood our being with these kind of positive affirmations, then we resonate with those energies. So examples might be, life is always smiling on me and I'm always smiling back. Or I'm always in the perfect place at the perfect time doing the perfect thing. Everything is perfectly unfolding. I'm in divine flow. I ask for and receive divine help with everything. I am totally open and receptive to receiving divine guidance and help. I love and support everyone, and everyone loves and supports me. So these kind of affirmations can really open us to the wonders of synchronicity in our life. And being grateful can also open us towards what life is offering us in every moment. One thing I didn't mention there is also prediction techniques or forms of divination, such as the I Ching and things like that. They are actually based on the law of synchronicity, whereby the material world is connecting to the psychic world through symbols, symbols which are not always understood, but are related to this collective subconscious. So we're kind of coming to the end of this presentation. I guess in conclusion, I would say that the phenomena of synchronicity is an affirmation that we exist in a conscious, living universe. Synchronicity represents a mysterious language of God, through which the divine consciousness is playfully communicating with us, giving us signs and leading us in the right direction on our path. So I hope that this presentation today will help you to continue to keep your eyes and your hearts open to the hidden messages that life is continuously offering you and all of us. Okay, so thank you all very much for being present here and your attention. I hope you got something from it. I hope, yeah, whether you accept everything or not, that's fine, but just hopefully be curious about this phenomena of synchronicity and open yourself towards it. And I wish you all the best and in the future. Hope to see you all soon as well. Take care. Bye-bye.